Hi everybody. So I wanted to do a quick lesson about how to glaze these pictures with the patterns, because every year I see some students do things that are kind of the hard way, and I have decided that this year I'm going to be a better teacher and give you a little information about it as a group, and then you can make choices. So all of your pieces have texture on them. That was the whole point, right? That was a huge piece of the lesson, was to learning how to put a pattern into a soft slab and then turn it into a piece. So I am now going to show you different ways to highlight the patterns and to make some design choices. And so let me adjust the camera so that it's in more space with my green X, socially distanced. Nobody else in here. Okay, so one of the things I did right away here was I put some tape on this because I want the top half of this to be different from the bottom. And so I'm not exactly sure how yet, but what I know is whatever I do here, I want to do something different here. And so I'd like a nice clean line instead of having to try to fix it afterwards. So the tape is in the closet, and we have different size tape, and this is a flexible tape. It's made for this purpose. It's good stuff. Here it is. And I have different thicknesses. This is our thickest. Okay, so this particular pattern here, very popular. A lot of students use it from the roller. And what a lot of students want to now take a brush and they want to paint on this. This happens every year. They paint with little tiny brushes and try to capture all this. And it's so agonizingly long and difficult. And it often doesn't come out as nice as they want. So if you recall my coil pot where I highlighted the texture, that's what I'm going to do here. It's going to be so much easier. So I'm going to, I have my water. Folks, I want to reiterate that you really shouldn't be doing anything in ceramics without first getting yourself a container of water. You're going to need water if you're sculpting or glazing. And I've decided that I want this to be a purple color. It just feels very regal, this pattern, and purple is a regal color, so I think that's what I'm going to do. So I've got my purple. I'm going to grab a meat tray, and you all know this by now. This is a little dirty, but I'm going to go over here. Be sure to clean your meat trays well, folks. I'm finding a lot of them covered with stuff when I go to use them. All right, I'm using a nice big brush, and I have a clean sponge ready. Oh yeah, of course, we want to wipe the pot down. Notice, sorry, this camera's not really showing what I'm doing. Let's tip it back. There we go. Notice that I'm wiping the pot down after I put the tape on, because if you wipe it down and then try to put the tape, the pot will be wet and the tape won't stick. All right, so this is the area I'm glazing. I also want to tell you, now that I've taught you about wax resist and gotten you into the habit of using wax resist, I want to now tell you that you don't always have to put it on the bottom. If you're finding the wax resist a little unwieldy, some people are having trouble applying it nicely. You don't have to put it on the bottom, but you do, before you put the piece in the kiln room, have to check and see if you've got any glaze on the bottom, and then wipe it off with a sponge. The wax resist just makes it easier to wipe off, but if you're struggling with the wax resist, then you can skip that step, but only if, when you're all finished, you're really careful to clean off the bottom. All right, here we go. I'm going to dip in my brush here. So you can see. And I'm going to apply this purple glaze. This brush is a little too flip-floppy for me. I'm going to try this one. I really want to get it into all the crevices. And I need some more. So I'm going to get it into these crevices because I'm going to wipe off the surface. And this is going to reveal, this is going to heighten the look of this design. And so now I'll take my sponge, dip it in water, squeeze it out, it's got to be damp. And now I'm going to pull that sponge across the surface. Can you see what's beginning to happen? it's coming off of the raised relief and staying in the spaces below. Now, it's not doing this 100%. I've got a low spot that's exposing some clay, but I don't mind that. You might, in which case this won't be a technique you'll want to use. But I like that. I like that sort of handmade. It looks a little aged. It looks a little antique, and I like that. Notice I'm trying to avoid the very edge of the pot, and it's not perfect. I'll go back and take a sponge and clean that up. So now I'm adding more. Okay, so now the bottom half is done. Back to my sponge, which is filled with glaze. You gotta often dip. That's why I always fill up my big container of water before I start this process, because I keep changing to a clean side. The cleaner the sponge, the better this technique works. Okay, so what you're going to notice is that the design is really evident. Now, I wiped up a little too much here, so it's kind of a back and forth experience. I probably didn't press in enough with the stencil there, with the roller. So now I'm going to try to get a little more specific by using, you can squeeze and get yourself a little piece of the sponge to do the job. There we go. That's a little better. That's a nice big area there. It's supposed to look white because there's a big impression there. Okay, so here is without the glaze, and here is with. And so you can see that the design is much easier to read this way. Trying to paint each one of these is really time-consuming and difficult. Now, suppose you don't want white to be the alternative. You really want purple and yellow. Well, then you would have to paint on the underglaze purple. I'll put it back over. Totally cover this with the purple. Put it in the kiln room. I will fire it. The purple will become permanently on there. And then you could put your yellow and wipe off. And you would have a yellow impression with purple lines. So that is the technique of putting on the clay and wiping it back off. So it has sort of an aged antique look. I'm going to grab a small brush because I want to see if this works. This is actually not something I've done before. Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to. What I'm trying to do now is to gently use a brush to remove the color so that you could get a little more control like we have here. Because that's kind of pretty, right? And let's see. Let's try using a teeny tiny piece of a sponge. Putting it into a little tiny. So this is actually you're watching me do a demonstration, and I'm experimenting with something I've never done before, which is what art making is about, taking some risks. So I've learned just now that you can be a little more fastidious and get the areas, the very specific areas you want wiped off with a little more care if you use a teeny tiny piece of a sponge. Right? I'm getting more control now. So like this can be heightened. This, I can just do that. Smaller sponge, folks. Smaller sponge, and you're going to be able to really... I'm pretty happy I just discovered this, because I think my students will be happier. It's a very beautiful design, and they always want to paint it, and I get why they want to paint it, because it's so pretty. But this is going to be easier than trying to paint it with a brush. That's okay. It's too full of underglaze. So here I go. All right, you get the idea. Yeah, small little brush, guys. Give it a go. I think this is, let's get this leaf. I can't stop now. I'm kind of addicted to this. Okay, but this can't be a long video. So there it is. Kind of cool. Yeah. Put that down. All right, a couple other things and then I'll be done, and on you go. There are glazes. There are glazes on these test tiles. And the reason there's, you might wonder, why did she have this finger mark there? See the finger? It's a person pointing. It's a stamp. And why is that on there? Well, because some glazes do some interesting things when they break over a raised area. They change color. And the more translucent the glaze, the more you get a change in the break. So if you notice, the very corners, the edges of all of this stuff on this pointed finger is white. And where there's crevices, it's a little darker. And when it's flat, it's all one color. Okay? That's the same thing with this. You can see that it has, it's when it breaks, it gets lighter. And you can see textures. Okay? Now, that's royal blue and butterscotch. Here's orchid. And orchid is very opaque. I don't see any breaking things happening there. So if I wanted to use this on a textured surface, I would know right away that it's not going to heighten the texture. It's not going to show it off. It's just going to flood it, and it's all going to look flat. So let me get, here's this pot. I really love this color. This is butter toffee. I love this color. Okay, over to the jars. Butter toffee. Here we go. Always shake it. Always shake it. And this time I'm going to paint this on, but I'm not going to wipe it off. I'm not going to wipe it off. And I could put tape on this right now if I wanted to do something different up here, but I won't waste your time. You saw how to tape, so I'll just glaze with butter toffee. So here I go. And remember that glazes need 2 heavy coats at least. And you're going to want to make sure, I'm not doing this in front of the camera, I'm so sorry. I'm really better at this. There we go. You want to be sure that you flood the wells, the little indentations. If you don't have any glaze in there, you won't get that effect of the breaking, right? The crevices were darker butter toffee, and the areas that had edges had a little white feeling to it. And then you'll get that third color in here, right? So you're going to get darker inside the crevices, you're going to get lighter where it breaks across the textures, and you're going to get a medium right on the actual flat areas. Okay, now, yes, I've made a kind of a mess on my edge. I have a bucket of water and a sponge ready, and all I do is wipe. I fold the sponge over the corner, just like you did with wax resist, and wipe, and then always check your bottom. Right? And you gotta have a little bit, you gotta leave a little bit so that the glaze doesn't fuse to the kiln shelf. If you go all the way down to this, it'll fuse. The last thing I'm going to tell you is that a lot of times students go for these crystal glazes for these pitchers. And I just want to point out that if you have a complicated, boy, that's overexposed. There we go. If you have a complicated textured surface, it's not a great idea to put a complicated textured glaze because they fight with each other. They fight with each other. These crystal glazes are really nice on flat surfaces. They're best on flat surfaces. And you can mix and match. Like I could put this glaze on the top of this where it's flat, right? I could put it all up here, or I could line it with that. And then what I want to point out is that look at this crystal glaze called Black Iris, okay? And this is called Harvest Gold. It's an underglaze. But look how Harvest Gold is pretty close to the color of the spots on this. And so that when I could put this speckled thing on the inside of my pitcher, or even on the top third where I have no design up here, and then I could put that Harvest Gold on the patterned area. Now I've got a really nicely designed pot where you're considering texture, surface, and color. And if you want these pitchers to work, if you want to take these home and put cream in them or gravy for Thanksgiving, you must put a clear, shiny, doesn't have to be clear. It just has to be a glassy glaze on the inside. You cannot just put underglaze or ignore it and put nothing, because your gravy will soak right into the clay body. You'll never get it clean, and it's kind of gross. Like, you need a glass surface. Think of all your dishes and serving things. They all are shiny with glaze, and that's to keep them clean and to be able to wash them and keep them sort of sanitary when you're using food. Foods don't mix and sink into the clay body, right? Because if you now know clay body is very porous. So you want to make very specific choices, my little puss, about how you're glazing these pitchers. I want to tell you guys that you did fabulously. Like, I loaded them all in the kiln, and everybody did such a nice job. Some of them are a little different, some of them are narrower. You did little special things with straps, and I couldn't be more pleased. I'm so excited for you that you're really turning into ceramic artists. You're learning the skills and you're applying them. So wonderful. So take your time to think through your glaze choices and consider some of the techniques I showed you today. And I'm happy in class to brainstorm with you. I won't tell you how to glaze your pot, right? How do I glaze this? What color? Don't want to answer that question. I would love for you to say, I'm thinking of glazing this, and this. What do you think? And then we can have a conversation. But I don't want to invent it for you. I want you to use your sense of design. Okay? Thanks for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing all those beautiful pictures glazed.